Let me just figure out how to share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully you can, Charlie, can you just confirm you can see the slide deck? Amazing. Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for joining today for Amazon session within the Enactus summer series. So today I'm basically going to be sharing a lot of career tips and some CV and interview tips, as well as hearing from a colleague of mine, so Abs, as Charlie mentioned earlier, who also does a lot of work with Enactus, of his experience of going through the Amazon interview process, and I can share some of my experiences as well. So hopefully you'll leave this session today with a lot of great information. But before we begin, I firstly just wanted to introduce myself. So my name's Sophie Peppett. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm part of the student programs team here at Amazon. So I've been at Amazon for about 4 years. I started as a brand specialist within the retail team. So I worked with companies like Sony and LG on their Amazon marketplace strategies and advised them on deal days like Black Friday and Prime Day. And then after about a year, I switched departments and I moved into a more marketing focused role within Amazon advertising. And I basically held events that connected sales teams with potential clients to talk to them about Amazon advertising opportunities. And then what I loved about events, I took into this role within the student programs team. And essentially what the student programs team do within EMEA is we recruit for internship and graduate roles across different lines of business within EMEA. And specifically, I'm part of the engagement and attraction team. So what that means is we put on events like this one, where we try and engage with you as students to help give you the skills that you need to succeed in the recruitment process, whether it's at Amazon or beyond. And so, like I mentioned, I'm going to be going through a CV and interview workshop. So hopefully this will be helpful if you decide to apply at Amazon or anywhere else. So let's get started. I'm going to start with some CV skills. So seems simple, but we often find that this doesn't get done correctly. So we're just going to cover like the structure of a CV. So how it works at Amazon is that you'll need to submit a CV for every role that you apply for. And the good news is that we don't actually require cover letter. So it's just the CV that you have to submit. And in terms of the structure, you have to make sure that obviously your name is on there, make sure that your personal details are on there as well. And in terms of personal details, all we need is like your email address and your phone number, just so that we can get in contact with you easily if we did want to schedule an interview with you. And then I know we get some questions around personal statement. So it is optional to include a personal statement, but maybe if you did want to highlight anything, that you thought you might want to bring to the table, maybe your passion for like a particular role of business, or a particular role or line of business, that would be absolutely fine. So it's completely optional to have a personal statement. Then for your education, we always ask that you include your university, the type of degree that you studied, and lots of people miss this, is actually the date. So when you started university and when you're due to graduate, with the month as well. That's really key information for us, because we're always looking at the education part on your CV to see if you're eligible for a role within student programs. And then with your work history, we need a brief description of what you did, what your responsibilities were, and what your achievements were. So a good place to start with like how you structure that is that Amazon is a really data-driven company. So if you do have anything that you can include in there, such as I increased sales in my department by X%, or I made a cost saving of X amount, or I reduced damages of a particular product by, X units a week, that kind of thing. Those are just obviously examples, but I would always say that that's a plus to include them. On the work history part, if you don't have much, so for example, if you're quite early on in your career, or you haven't even done any internships or work experience, that's totally fine, because we're going to talk about this later as part of like all of the work that you do with Enactus anyway. But maybe there's something that you've done within Enactus or at university. Maybe you've been part of a society, for example, and you've taken up an additional project. I'd say definitely feel free to put them in there as well if you think that they're relevant and they show the skills needed for the role that you're applying for. And then after that, it is optional, but you could include a skills session in there as its own section. So I'd say that this part of the CV is super useful for a job description, because some roles that we have, like technical roles, require some super specific skills. So you are always going to want to highlight them if you do have them, for example, like technical coding skills. So if you're applying for like a software development engineering position, you could list the different coding languages that you know or that you might have some experience in. So yeah, optional, but if there's something that you would want the recruiter to know, definitely list it. And then hobbies and interests, this might sound quite obvious, and it's optional, but if there is anything in there that's relevant to the role, you should include it. So if your hobby's hanging out with your friends, probably I wouldn't include that. But if you do marketing courses like in your spare time, or you attend, I don't know, coding events, or watch webinars as part of like a passion that you've got for the particular role that you're applying for, like podcasts, and you're applying for a podcasting role, definitely put it in there, because it shows interest and passion for the role that you're applying for. So it's interesting to the recruiters to see that. And actually, just to let you know as well, that at Amazon specifically, your CV is reviewed by an actual human and not a piece of tech or a robot. So it's super important to make sure that your CV is like nicely structured and easy to read. It can just be structured, without, it doesn't need to like a design on it. It just has to be structured in a sensible format, essentially. So you don't need to like make it look fancy. It just needs to read well. Okay, so that's the structure. And then I will be taking questions as well at the end of this session. So do please put them in the chat as well. But for now, I'm just going to go through the presentation. So hints and tips. I'd say the first one for Amazon is to show achievements. So like I mentioned, use data. If you manage a budget as part of a project at university, or as a piece of extracurricular work that you did, make sure you mention how much the budget was worth, how much, percentage of the budget that you had control over. Were you the sole person responsible for it? And just add some numbers to kind of quantify the achievements that you list to show impact. And then also be concise as well. So we normally say 1 page for your CV is absolutely enough and preferred, maximum 2 pages. That's obviously different for anyone maybe studying like an MBA or a PhD, but because those tend to be like longer CVs. But if you're applying for an internship or a grad role, 1 page is definitely enough. And then make sure that it's in order. So if you've got work experience, go from, most recent at the top to oldest at the bottom, so it's easy to read. And then consistent formatting is one that we see often. So if you put the company name and the job title in bold for one role, then make sure it's done all the way through the document for the other positions that you've listed, and just make sure that you check the formatting. And if there's anyone that can check your CV for you, just to have a look over it to see if they've got like spelling mistakes. Definitely make use of that opportunity, because it always helps to have another pair of eyes. And sometimes when you read something once, even if you read it, you'll skip over the mistakes. So it's just good to just put it through spell check, or even just get, a family member just to have a quick look at it. And then just another note on the work experience piece, just remember that if you don't have work experience with other employees, you probably will have some great transferable skills. So just make sure that you show teamwork for university projects, your time management, attention to detail, whatever it is that the role is looking for, that you're applying for in like a graduate position. There will be transferable skills that you've got from your education that you could get outside of standard work experience. So just have a real think about the types of skills that you might have acquired through the different pieces of work you've been doing outside of Enactus, but also with Enactus as well. So yeah, that's a good starting point. Great. So actually, do you know what? I think I'll pause there and just take a few questions from the chat box. Let me see if I can get the chat box to work. Abs, did you have any questions coming in from the
Yeah,
chat
there's a
box?
few. I've managed to
Yeah.
get through so far. So there's a question here around a couple of people asking about whether they should, if they're more experienced, should they put employment first and then education second? And just a question on prioritizing those two, which one is it more valuable to have higher up in the CV?
Yeah, so I think if you're applying for a graduate position and this is your first role, then put your education at the top and then list your projects underneath. That just gives the recruiter an idea of your graduation like dates and when you might be available. So that's super important for the recruiter to see first thing. And then if you've got a couple of years experience and you think that might be applicable for the role that you're applying for, put the your most recent permanent work history at the top and then your education underneath.
Awesome. I think someone also mentioned about skipping education, and I'd say you wouldn't skip it. You'd still have it in there to show whatever education you have. It's just how much you prioritize it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, still include it for sure. Definitely worth mentioning.
Cool. And then there's a question here. How can you best showcase your achievements in Enactus positions on your CV?
That is a good question. Do you know what? I think we're going to discuss that in our Q&A section at the end. So why don't you and I have a discussion about that? And I think the whole group will benefit from it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And one more general one. What makes a CV stand out on an initial view?
So what makes a CV stand out is honestly being concise and well formatted, and just when someone's put thought into their best work that they've showcased, because you can tell it's got like a personal element to it. So if you're proud of the achievements that you're putting forward, however small, list them and make sure that you've got data or sort of quantifiable you know back up to show like why what you've done is important. I think a lot of times students, especially I had this as well when I applied, you you don't think that your experience is like important enough to like make the CV. What makes the CV? That kind of thing. So don't think that just because applying to Amazon means you have to have some like all singing, all dancing, you have to win all these amazing awards, like, you have to be part of every single society at university. Just like a couple of highlights as to who you are as like a person, what kind of things are you interested in, what skills do you think you can bring to the role, and just making sure that it's appropriate for the role that you're applying for. So is there some relatable transferable skills there? And like I said, one page is most certainly enough. So if you include pages and pages, I think that's not going to make your CV stand out. So those would be my top tips.
The questions are flying in now, so do quick fire and see how many we can cover. We might
Okay.
skip a few and come back to them later, so we just cover the full session. So question here, is international experience relevant in your CV while applying in the UK?
Yes, definitely. Just make sure that if your role is in the UK, then the UK recruiter might not be aware of the type of company that you've been working for abroad. They might not be as familiar. So maybe just a sentence as to what the company actually does, if you've listed a company name, and just a bullet point as to what your roles and responsibilities were.
Great. Next one. Should you put a picture on your CV?
I don't, because we don't hire based on what you look like. We hire based on your experience. So it doesn't make any difference to us. And I personally wouldn't, because it takes up extra space and you want to use that space for your achievements.
Agree. There's a question here about, should you include all your GCSEs or just maths and English? E.g., can you just say, I got 9 GCSEs with X in maths and English?
Yeah, you can say the abbreviated version. And then when we do sort of eligibility checks, your grades will just be checked as a formal just check to see what you got on that matches your CV essentially.
Couple more quick fire ones. If I have certifications that aren't related to the position, should I include them?
I personally wouldn't. I personally then just use up that time to showcase a few more of your achievements. You can tweak and tailor your CV to the different roles that you apply for. So that certification might still be relevant just for a different role.
think it depends what it's in as well. So if it's something like project management, that's very broad and can apply to pretty much any job. But is it something very specific in financial analysis and you're applying for a job very different from that, it might not be relevant, especially if you don't have space on the CV.
Agreed.
Do you need module grades on your CV? I don't think we need that level of detail.
No.
And would you recommend putting any sort of publications on your CV?
Do you know what? I put a link to your LinkedIn and then share extra information, like all of the work that you might have associated with the different positions you've held from your LinkedIn.
And then I think we can move on, but there was a question here about if we had a example CV format to share. I think we can look at that and see if we can send that after the session.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of resources that are available, so we'll make sure that we share the links.
Cool, I think that's it for now.
Amazing. Right then, so next topic is interview skills. So interview skills. Okay, so we get a lot of questions in student programs about interviews and the kind of interview process and any kinds of skills or preparation. So I thought we could focus a little bit now on interviews Amazon, but also wider interview skills as well. So I think we need to cover the leadership principles just because Amazon is quite a peculiar place and we do have a lot and they do factor into our culture and also our interviews heavily. So at Amazon, we have a set of leadership principles. They basically encompass our culture and our company. So how we work, and basically they're just built into everything that we do as a company day to day. As you can see, there's quite a few on the slide. We've got 16 leadership principles and we really do use them every day at Amazon. And it's just really how we measure success as well. I'm not going to go through each one because we'll be here for hours, but I'll just pick out a few that I think are just really valuable for student interviews, for the internship and graduate positions, and the ones that you will probably be asked on, but you might be asked about any of them. So I'm just going to pick out a few key ones that I think would be good to focus on. So the first one would be ownership. I think that's really important to think long term when you're thinking about a role at Amazon and really taking ownership over the responsibilities you have in your role, no matter how small the task, and not taking the stance of, that's not my job, or acting on behalf of your whole team and not just your role and yourself. So make sure you focus on that one. I'll go into like how you prepare the questions and answers around these later. But yeah, these are the ones that I think are good to focus on for now. The second one would be dive deep. So this is something we do every day, all day at Amazon. We're really, really connected to the details through data. So making sure that we're looking at metrics and making sure that data is like informing our decisions. And we're not just working on the basis of assumptions or anecdotal stories. And then deliver results as well as a super key one. So it's really important that you know that we're a customer obsessed company, and it's really important that we're delivering results not only for our customers but for the teams that we're working in as well. So whether it's getting a deadline in on time, that's delivering for your team, submitting that report, delivering for your manager, or developing that program or developing that product, you're delivering for our customers there as well. So those would be my 3 top focuses. And the best way that you can prepare for the behavioral part of an Amazon interview, so the competency questions around an Amazon interview, which is just to really look at these leadership principles and think of maybe 2 or 3 examples for each principle. And because that any behavioral or competency-based interviews here at Amazon will be based on these principles, all the questions you'll be asked will somehow tie into one of these. So the way that I prepared is I looked at the leadership principles, and then for each one I noted down a few examples, either in my career or university, and just places and times that I thought I'd showcase these principles. And I mentioned earlier, I keep mentioning it, that we're really data-driven. So my biggest top tip when preparing for these examples is to think about how your examples can be backed up by successes with data. So how can you quantify some of the examples? And of course, not all examples will be able to be backed up by data, but it's just really good to have it to show the difference that you made and to help the interviewer understand the impact of your work. And just a quick call out as well, because I get this a lot, and I do think it's important to note, because some people think of Amazon as this company that uses brain teasers or like gives really vague or ambiguous questions. Someone asked me if we ask questions like, how many windows are there in Manhattan, or are there more wheels or doors in the world? So it's none of that. You won't get any of that in an Amazon interview. It's very much leadership principle based, and all based on past behaviors and past things that you've done. So you can kind of demonstrate those skills if you prepare for the interviews in this way with the leadership principles. So it would just be, tell me about a time when you did this. I mean, we'll go into some examples later on, but how have you showed this leadership principle? How have you demonstrated that leadership principle? So I think it's a good thing, because the ambiguous questions can be really difficult to prepare for. So hopefully that's good news to anybody who thought that we have questions like that in our interviews, because we don't. And so, yeah, let me give you some examples on how you can actually structure your answer based on these principles. So the best way to do that would be to use the STAR structure. So STAR, that stands for situation, task, action, result. And this is how you structure your answer. So if you think about customer obsession, for instance, and you're trying to think of an example for customer obsession. So you think about a time where you might have showcased customer obsession in your work history or your educational history, and then you start with the S, and always start with the S of the STAR. So start with the situation. So you've got to set the context and set the scene for the interviewer for the example that you're going to use. So you just explain why you were in this situation in the first place. So start with the S of the STAR always. And then the T. So what were you trying to achieve, and what was the end goal? So giving an overview and an idea of the objective that you were trying to achieve in that example. The A of the STAR is action. So this is where I think you should spend the most time in your answer. So what actions did you personally take? So I think the most common mistake we see as an interviewer in an interview is someone talking about, we did this or we did that, but we want to know what you did specifically, and what you achieved personally in an action. So don't be afraid to call out any of your successes in this part. We want to make sure that you're super focused on like the ownership leadership principle, or whatever leadership principle you're focusing on. So we want to see it come through in the answer. So make sure that you're talking about the actions that you actually took. And then again, on the R, on the results section, make sure you cover the outcome and any data or lessons learned, anything you might have done differently, if you could do the situation over again. So just a quick call out now, I've kind of covered off the STAR structure, is at the end of each interview, you'll be given the opportunity to ask the interviewer a question. So I'd always prepare a few questions to ask the interviewer as well, because it shows really good engagement, and you can just jot them down anywhere. The interviews are virtual as well, so you have the benefit of having your notes next to you, or a pen and paper. You can just jot them down as you're going along, and then come back to them at the end of the interview. And before I take some questions on the STAR structure, I'm just going to go through an example interview question so you can kind of see what I mean. So here's some on the screen. So these are the types of behavioral questions that you'll be asked in an Amazon interview. So I mentioned that we won't be asking any brain teasers. So it'll be something like, tell me about a time when you were faced with a problem that had a number of possible solutions. What was the problem, and how did you determine the course of action? What was the outcome of that choice? So you could use a lot of examples that you might have come across in your experience. So you could use a lecture or something, or a seminar. Was there ever a time, for the second one, was there ever a time that you made a mistake within a group project, or was there ever a time that you might have failed on a particular module? Just, you can use any transferable skills and any examples for this. So yeah, there's plenty to choose from, and it can be, don't think as well that you have to come up with some massive project that you led, or you like led some transformational huge change within an organization. It doesn't have to be that big. It can literally be tell me about a time when you were faced with a problem. That could be, in my old role as a brand specialist, a product was down on the site, and I had, you know, the brand asking me questions about it. Why is it down? Why can't we sell it? It has a number of possible solutions. That product could be offline for any number of reasons, but you as the brand specialist have to figure out and what's wrong. So taking ownership and like customer obsessed with in mind, you have to then investigate. So I had to investigate why that product was down, run a number of tests, figure out the problem, and in this example, let's say the product didn't have a price, so it wasn't displaying on the Amazon website. Then how did I determine the course of action? You check with the brand what the price of the product should be and make sure that it's signed off by the vendor manager. Input the price into the back end of the product, and then the product goes live again. And then you communicate and then maybe put in some kind of methodology or practice so that this kind of problem doesn't happen in the future. So those are the kind of small things that can then be used as an example. So I know I've given, you know, an example there, and I've got like a few hints and tips, but I'll just pause there to see if there are any questions that have come in from the audience.
So we've got one here, so which I think it's actually a really good one, because I think I've seen candidates sometimes struggle with this balance in their answers. So what do you think is appropriate to hear? We gathered as a team, or I gathered the team?
I think it's really important to say what you specifically did. So you can give context by saying the team gathered this information, but then what did you do in that specific instance? So did you then look at the data? Did you analyze it? Did you make decisions based off that data? Just to really separate what the team delivered and what you delivered, because in this example, you're trying to showcase what your successes and what you delivered.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've seen, you know, it's great that you work in a team, but I've seen a lot of interviews where the candidates keep saying we, but then it's hard for you to know, did they just sit along whilst everyone else did the work, or did you contribute something meaningful?
Exactly.
When asked a question, can we request 1 or 2 minutes to brainstorm an answer?
Absolutely. I think any interviewer would prefer you to just sit for a minute, formalize your thoughts a little, so you come up with a clear answer rather than stopping or starting and then having to repeat yourself or start over again. So please do take the time that you need to come up with the most relevant answer to the question based on the leadership principle that they're trying to target.
And do you look at LinkedIn profiles if they're included on the CV during the shortlisting process?
I think that depends on the recruiter who's looking at the CVs, but generally we just take the CV as face value. So it might become more, the recruiter or the team might look at the LinkedIn more when you're going through the kind of hiring phase, but at the initial, you know, screening before you come to interview, it would just be the CV as it is, as you submitted it.
I think that's all the current questions here. I think what, if you don't mind, I'll just drop in a couple more examples if helpful, because I have these notes. So in terms of trying to think about some other examples that you could use, so let's say you have a question which is about, give me an example of a time when you were able to deliver an important project under a tight deadline. So this question is really asking about your project management skills. Now, there's so many things you could use for this. Any uni projects, group projects, within Enactus, if you're working on any of the social community projects, either as a project leader or a team member, you're always managing deadlines. There's always something you have to do that you're responsible for. That applies even on the fundraising side as well, on commercial projects. So don't be afraid to use those examples if you feel that's the best example you have that demonstrates those skills, because that's valuable to the interviewer. It doesn't have to be that I did some massive internship over here. if it's not relevant, it's not going to make a difference. So choose what you think is the best one to highlight your skills. Another one I've got here is, tell me about a time when you didn't have enough data to make the right decision. So in this instance, as an interviewer, I'd want to know, what research did you do? What kind of data did you look at? And that could be any kind of data. It could be you've gone online and you've researched, what's the rate of homelessness in your local county and what are the council doing about it? But then there's also qualitative data. Maybe you've gone and interviewed some beneficiaries and asked them about their experience and how it impacts them. That's all very useful to understand what different sources have you considered. Did you talk to other people in your team? Did you get help from business advisors and coaches? Those kind of inputs are really useful because that helps me understand that you really thought about how can you collect that information. And then once you've got that, how did you use it? Is that data reliable? Did you question it? Did you find a better source? So that's just a couple of examples of how you might use some more Enactus specific experience to answer these kind of questions.
Amazing. So I'll just cover off some hints and tips and then some common mistakes as well. So hints and tips. So one quick thing is that people do get very into the leadership principles, which is obviously so important, but then they forget to kind of just have a little summary in the back of their head on their motivation for the role and their understanding of the role. I know Amazon job descriptions can be a little vague, so just a quick one-liner about why you want to apply, why you want to work at Amazon, and why this role why this role is interesting to you. Just have that in the back of your head so you're not caught off guard when they answer that question, ask that question even. And then, like I said, the biggest hint I could give would be to include data and numbers to back up your STAR framework answers. Prepare a few examples for each principle. So don't use one example for every single question, because you're just going to be repeating yourself. And after the interview takes place, all the interviewers get together and they kind of talk through the situations that you gave. So it's best to have a variety of topics. So yeah, have that detail as well. Lacking oh, that's mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask clarification. Yes. So when you get a question from an interviewer, if you don't understand it, it's better just to ask if they can phrase it a different way rather than answering and then answering incorrectly. So you can ask for it to be rephrased. You can take a moment or a minute or two just to think about what that question might mean. Or you can ask for a different question altogether, because there are multiple questions within that same leadership principle. So that's absolutely fine. Yeah, like I said, prepare some questions to ask your interviewer and keep a pen and paper handy or a separate, tab in your laptop so you can note some things down. And ask the interviewer if they'd like more detail. So once you've given your answer and they've finished questioning you on that particular question, you can say, did I give enough detail? Is there anything you'd like to know? That's always handy, because then they can just check that they've got everything they need from that particular leadership principle that they're testing. And yes, use the STAR method. Super, super handy just to have that in the back of your head. And then common mistakes. So the first one would be not listening to the question being asked, or not answering properly. So saying we instead of I all the time. Lack of structure and clarity. So hopefully if you use the STAR method, that won't be a problem and you won't be lacking the structure. Answering too quickly. So like I said, if you are not sure what you're going to say, just take a few minutes and think about it and then come up with your answer, rather than rushing in and then having to change it halfway through, or realizing that you weren't prepared, particularly with this example. So you can even jot down a few bullet points if you want to structure your answer before you just go straight into it. And then just be mindful of your body language as well. So I know it's virtual, and I know there's been so many things on Zoom, Chime, like all of the Teams, all of the platforms, but I think it just can be so easy to slip sometimes into like a more casual way of holding yourself if you're not face to face. So just be mindful of this on interviews, that it is an interview, cameras on always, unless the interviewer has specified otherwise, and just be vocal with any issues that you might be having with like tech, or don't try and pretend like you don't have problems with internet. If you are having problems with internet, like, you won't be marked down for it. It's just good to just let the interviewer know as much as possible where you might need some help, or a different way of doing things. Great. So I will just pause there for any more questions. Have any more questions come in, Abs?
Yeah, well, something about LinkedIn, which I've tried to cover off typing, so save you some energy there, Sophie, and
Yeah,
just make sure we can stick to time as well. So I've put in, people asked if we can share our LinkedIn, so I've dropped mine in the chat.
yeah, I can share mine as well.
I've mentioned that, LinkedIn is your online CV, so do bear that in mind. You can feel free to scroll through mine. I keep mine up to date when I can, and there's a lot of stuff you can put in LinkedIn. So when you're able to, if there's an image that you're allowed to use from a project, or there's a link to a website or something relevant, that helps flesh it out, because when recruiters are looking through, it helps them get some more context. So if they do want to click through and find out more, or visualize what you're talking about, I find that's quite helpful. And I would say, especially early on, if you can get a couple of LinkedIn recommendations, it doesn't hurt. So for example, if you've got a project leader you've worked very closely with, or maybe a mentor who can vouch for you, just ask them either through LinkedIn or separately, if they mind writing a short recommendation for you, because having a couple of those is helpful to add to your credibility, on top of the content that's in there.
For sure, definitely. Nice. I also realized as well that the next section is a sort of a little bit of an interview between me and you about our own experiences with Amazon interviewing. And I realized that you haven't even done an introduction. So sorry, I asked you to jump on the questions. So do you want to give the audience just a bit of background about who you are and what you do with Enactus?
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I guess proper introduction. So hi everyone, I'm Abtahi Islam. You can call me Abs. I used to be a student at the University of Surrey a while ago. I was involved with Enactus there throughout my time. Loved it. I did an international business degree, and then part of that, I did a 1-year placement at Unilever, where I also got involved with Enactus. So I obviously can't let it go. And did a whole bunch of roles, from team leader to managing the business advisors, looking at projects. And then I graduated and I wanted something a little bit different. So I came to work for the amazing guys at Enactus UK. It was an awesome experience. I learned and did so much that I wouldn't get, necessarily in another role, because, it's not, a huge team, but they do so much. And I think once you've been there, you really appreciate how hard Enactus UK and the country teams work to support all the programs. So loved every minute of that, did that for a couple of years. And then I kind of felt ready for a different challenge. So I actually then looked and joined Amazon. So I joined as a brand specialist as well in my first couple of years. So I was working with brands like Toshiba and Panasonic and helping them grow their sales on Amazon. So one day I'd be negotiating a deal for Prime Day that our customers could buy at a discount. The next day I was helping them solve stock problems. Next day I was doing a bit of marketing. So it was like a crash course in e-commerce. But my heart was in film and TV. I love entertainment. So I always went to work in Prime Video. So a couple of years ago, I moved into the team and role I'm in now, which is as a launch manager within the Prime Video team, working across various countries in Europe to launch movies and shows, which is pretty cool, I think.
Very cool role. And how did you? So joining, like, how did you find the interview experience? Because I remember my experience 4 years ago, and I actually interviewed twice for Amazon. So I interviewed once for a role that I thought was perfect for me, but it actually wasn't. Looking back at it, it was like a more salesy focused role. And so I got to the final stage and it didn't work out for me. But then I applied for the brand specialist role and I went through again, and I got that role that way. So it was obviously second time lucky. But how did you feel about the overall experience?
Yeah, I think generally applying for jobs, especially when like early in the career, if you're just graduating or recently graduated, let's face it, it's not fun, right? You do a lot of research, you got to find about the companies. Sometimes you got to do tests, interviews, calls. It's hard work. I think, it's important to get that right balance of, you want to apply to a range of different companies, but really do think carefully about what you're applying to. What are you going to learn from that organization? Do they have good training in place? Does it look like a good fit for the things you're interested in and want to do, and the areas you want to learn? I think that's really helpful in deciding which places to apply to. But also, as you get further in the process, you learn more about companies from speaking to interviewers, and you might find you go halfway through a process and maybe it's not for you. And if you really feel that, it's fine to opt out. But yeah, throughout the process, I think you can learn a lot. So yeah, I found it really interesting and challenging, to work out, where do I apply, where do I look? So you look at all the employer lists, you look at LinkedIn, you get recommendations from people on where to apply. I think the Amazon process, so I didn't come in on the grad scheme, I came in direct, but the Amazon process was really interesting. I think what I did like was, all the questions you get asked, they're meaningful questions. They force you to think about actually what skills you have and demonstrating that. And I found certainly the interviews I had, really helpful and pleasant. I learned a lot at the end by asking them questions about what it's like to learn about the culture. So I think when you do get the opportunities in the interview process, if you have the opportunity to ask questions and there's time at the end, make the most of it. Learn about that company. What does that person do? What is their culture like? What training do they offer? Because those are the kind of things you get hints about on websites, but the true picture you can learn from the employee.
Yeah, I totally agree. And on the interview questions at Amazon, they are so meaningful and they do make you think. I'm using the examples that I prepared when I joined, like still. So even though they change slightly over time and you get new experiences to call on and new examples to give, you're just doing a lot of preparation for your future self anyway. So it's a really good exercise to do. So I think it's definitely very a very rigorous interview process. But yeah, it's definitely useful. So I guess let's loop back then to the question that was brought up earlier about what we think that Enactus students could take from the Enactus organization when thinking about preparing for interviews with Amazon. I know we've touched on it, but how would you start thinking about it, Abs?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Enactus has been, for me personally, like critical to getting any of the jobs that I've gotten. So when I was applying for my placement year at Unilever, I was using examples from projects that I'd worked on and fundraising I'd done to demonstrate that I have these skills. Yes, I don't have much work experience, but I've got these skills. So I used it for that. Obviously, I used it for applying to Enactus UK. But then even applying for my Amazon role, in the first job, I was using a mix of things from uni and that first role. So what I tried to do was treat Enactus like on your CV and in interviews, like you would any job experience, right? It doesn't matter that it's voluntary. It doesn't matter if you get paid for it or not. It's an experience that you've done and you've learned something from it. So I would look at example interview questions online, and I would just get a few examples down, which I think would fit a few of those. So I had a range that I could pull on and that I could tailor depending on the question I get asked or the company that I'm applying to. And I think that really helped me because it made me think, okay, what examples do I have of working in a team? What examples do I have of solving a problem? And thinking really broadly. And then some of those I got from group projects. Some of those were things like, oh no, like our project partners dropped out. We need to find a new one. How do we solve that? or we're doing a fundraising event for a club night on campus. We've got 100 tickets left to sell. How do we sell that to maximize? So I think thinking more broadly about what skills and behaviors is that question trying to tap into helped me think, okay, across Enactus, across work experience, across uni, here are all the kind of key examples I have. And I kind of wrote them up in bullet point format. And it just meant when I'm applying online, talking in interviews, I kind of had a go-to list to get me started. So I think that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, with your interview prep as well, maybe you didn't get support with your interview prep, but generally with your career hunting overall, did you get any support with mentors, or was there anyone that you kind of spoke to, any network that you tapped into whilst you were looking for a job straight out of uni?
Yes, I would do things like join sessions like this, read articles on LinkedIn. I definitely found, both as a candidate and now on the other side, when I interview people, the STAR method really is useful. It helps you structure your answers. And for an interviewer, it's so much easier for me when I'm taking notes, if a candidate presents it in the STAR format. And it makes it easy for me, because then if they go through an example and something's missing, I know exactly which part is missing, and I can ask them follow-ups to get that information. I did interact with people on LinkedIn. So there was a connection of a connection who worked in entertainment. So I was able to get introduced to them and get some advice on the industry. From my time at Enactus at university, there were a couple of business advisors I got to know really well. And I actually went to them and had a few of them look over my CV. I had someone at the careers department look over my CV to give me that advice as well. And I had a mentor from Enterprise Rent-A-Car at the time, who I'm still in touch with today, and he was great. And he gave me a lot of advice around, career searching and jobs and what to think about. So I think, do think about who's in your network that you can reach out to, because there's probably already quite a few people there who maybe you haven't reached out to, but could help you in some way.
For sure. And I think as you start looking at your LinkedIn network and your family network, your cousins, aunties, uncles, their wives and husbands and daughters and older brothers and sisters and friends of friends, suddenly you've got a picture of people that you might be able to put you in touch with someone, because it's all about asking the first questions and then seeing where that might go. So definitely put your intention out there, and if you want to go and find someone that works in entertainment, then ask the questions. So that's what I did as well. I reached out to people on LinkedIn for the companies that I wanted to work in, and then asked them if they had any sort of recruitment events that they had coming up. And most of the time they're happy to point you in the direction of the right resources. They might not have the time to sit down and have a one-to-one sort of coffee with you. Some might, but they're happy to sort of send you in the right direction. And then I ended up finding an online event, and then you join, and then you get more access to resources. So yeah, it's a bit of exploration as to what you're actually passionate about, but definitely go out there and use your network. Amazing.
The chat box is blowing up.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's go back to the questions on the chat.
I've got one question here. I started as a project member, then went down to project leader. Now I'm back down to being a project member. Would this be seen as bad in an interview, as I haven't progressed into the committee?
Is the committee some part of the company? Did it give any?
I think that's the leadership team within the Enactus Society. I say that's not. Yeah, I think it depends on the reasons for it. I mean, I don't really see that as a bad thing. I think, is it relevant to the question? So, I think if you're getting across the skills you have in relation to that question, I mean, I'm not bothered if you're a project member or a team leader. It's, do you have the skills? You can be a project member who was very involved and actually, led on activities, led on certain parts of the project, and just didn't formally have that title, but you still have leadership qualities and skills. So I wouldn't, see that as an issue. I think, stay focused on the question and highlighting the skills and the behaviors you have that answers that question.
I agree.
And that should be enough. You say you interact with people on LinkedIn. How do you do this? How would you message them? So it depends on people's settings on LinkedIn. Some people you can just directly message. Some, I think when you click connect, you have the option to send a message. I would highly recommend, if you don't know that person, do introduce yourself. Just give them a quick overview of who you are, and why you want to connect, because then that gives them some background. Otherwise, they might feel like they're just being spammed by all these random people. So it's as simple as that, really. If you know somebody who already knows that contact, get them to introduce you, because that will help with the connection. One for you, Sophie. Do you have to make it clear to an interviewer you're using the STAR method? Like saying, in response to your question, I was in this situation where I was a project, blah, 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 blah.
You don't have to make it super clear. You don't have to state that you're using the STAR method, but your answer should be structured so it's pretty easy to tell. So you can lead into the question by saying, so the situation was, and you can finish off the question with, so as a result, kind of thing. And make it seem conversational, make it seem natural, but in your head you're obviously following that very, very structured way of answering. So no, the answer is no, you don't have to make it clear that you're using the actual STAR method.
Could I just ask something? Sorry. I was one who said about the question, before, I think it was Sophie's question. And you said about, like introducing yourself on LinkedIn. I've just added or followed you apps, and yours is like message with a lock, so obviously I can't message you to like introduce who I am. Like, how do you get about that? You know what I mean? If other employers are like that.
It will vary for each person. I think it also depends what device you use on. So I think if you do it on web, you get a prompt like, do you want to leave this person a message in the intro? I have all sorts of people adding me all the time, so there should be a way for you to send me a message. There is a test that I do, which is if someone adds me and I don't know who they are, if they have Enactus written on their LinkedIn, I will accept the invite.
Okay.
Because obviously I do check, who's this person that's added me. So don't worry, I will look through afterwards. But yeah, so Enactus should be on your CV and LinkedIn.
When I clicked on the message thing, it said like premium. But do you recommend we should all get premium?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd start with your local network and then look at LinkedIn and see if there are options. Obviously LinkedIn has its own rules around it, but if you can message the person, then great. If you can't, go to the company's LinkedIn profile and see what like student recruitment events they might run. There's bound to be a page where they have more information about their recruitment strategies and things like that, so you can kind of look and see. I mean, Amazon do host like virtual events, and then maybe when you go to an event, then you see like a name, and then you can actually have that introduction, say, hi so and so, I was at this event on this day and I saw you speak, you were great, blah blah blah, I'm so and so, I'm like, but I'm wanting to do this and I know that you're in the same field, I'd love to have a chat with you, or send you my CV, that kind of thing.
Oh, brilliant, thank you for that.
No worries.
What else have we got in here? LinkedIn projects. Make sure I'm not missed anything. What is the most effective way to network your way into interviews? How can we capitalize on our existing network and grow it?
How can we capitalize on our existing network and grow it? So I would really just start with asking your direct network first, like a question about, do you know anyone? Say if I wanted to work in the entertainment industry, you go ask everyone that you might have, be at Sunday dinner or a family lunch or whatever, emailing your closest relatives, if you don't speak to them or if they live in different countries, do you know someone in this industry? And then if you get a contact, then go to that contact and ask them. So it's really the process of trying to figure out if you've got someone that might know someone, and then you just go down into they know someone that they could put you in touch with. That's how I found my role within Amazon, because you just ask and you look for the information, and then you might get access to a particular event online. You might get put in touch with someone's mum or dad that might work in an industry that you're interested in, and that person might not have, oh, I have a job for you, but then they might say, oh, so I work with so and so in this team, and she might have some more roles about student programs, and then that person might be able to say, well, we do, but you have to go through this process, because it's all about finding the information. So start with the questions and don't be afraid to ask and get your voice heard, because the more you say it, the more you get known for like wanting to do that specific thing. So then someone might just pop into their head and think, oh, I know a person who's interested in that, when the opportunity presents itself. Abs, would you say anything in addition to that?
No, I think that covers it. Just conscious of time.
Oh, yes.
So there are a few questions I've just sort of copied and pasted on my list. One here I really liked. If I was project leader for a project and that wasn't successful, but it led to me coming up with a new project, would it be bad to include in my interview if the first one failed, or would it show growth and ability to ideate and solve problems? Definitely the latter. Do not be afraid of failure. I think that's one of the great things about Enactus. You're encouraged to fail fast and learn from it. I think the key thing is, what have you learned? So if something's failed, me as an interviewer, I'd be trying to understand, okay, do you know why it failed? And what did you learn from it? Did you put something in place to stop that happening in the future? Did you take those learnings and apply it to a new project or a new solution? So I think that's key. If it's just, oh, well, this failed, you're not really sure why, and you didn't really dig into it and learn anything from it, don't mention it, because it's not a great example. But if you've learned from it, that's great. So definitely put stuff like that in.
For sure, definitely.
I think there's a few. It's how would you recommend to keep LinkedIn connections warm? I think that kind of depends on how well you know that person. Obviously, if you speak to them outside of LinkedIn and stuff, that helps. I wouldn't spam people for the sake of it, but on LinkedIn, you have the ability to post and share content. So I think that's how you get visibility to your network. If you have content you think is relevant to share, is useful, which might be, hey, look, we just achieved this on our project, or we've just joined a new project partner, or we've fundraised this much. Think about what's relevant that your network might be interested in, because they'll see that in their feed. And as more people like it and share it, they'll kind of be aware of you in the back of their mind. So next time you reach out to them, they'll think, oh yeah, Sophie, oh, she did that great webinar with Amazon and Enactus. It was awesome. I can't wait to see what she wants to talk about. That's my suggestion. I don't know if you have anything else, Sophie.
No, I definitely use the content sharing part of just putting the stuff that you're interested in out there. And if they're like-minded people, then they're going to be reacting to it and they're going to know you for that as well. So definitely utilize that if you can.
Charlie, how are we for time? I know we've kind of ended. I don't know if there's another session or if we can carry on.
No, we're absolutely fine. There's no session following this one, so you can take as long as you want.
Cool. So if you're right to carry on a little bit?
Yeah, totally fine.
Cool. Let's see how many of these we can get through for you guys.
Okay. But wait 1 second while you're looking for a question. I will just say about the QR code on the screen. So this QR code takes you to the Amazon Student Programs job site. So just scan it on your phone and we can share the link afterwards. But essentially that's where it's only student jobs on that site. So you won't get mixed up with like other industry hires. This is just student internships and graduate opportunities. There's not that much on there at the moment because we're just about to start a new season, but more roles will be going across all the different lines of business that we recruit in EMEA at the start of August. So imminently. Just thought I'd put that out there.
Awesome. There are some Enactus specific ones. So Sophie, I'm just going to rattle through those for these guys. So follow up on the failure question. How do you present best what you learned from failure? So for example, I learned this project didn't have a good needs assessment before creating it. Any tips on how to present that? So I don't have the full detail of this example, but so if you join this project and it didn't come together and you find out later it's because the needs assessment wasn't done properly, what's important there is why. Was a clear structure for the needs assessment not followed? Did you not consult the right people? And what did you take away from that? So if you saw that as an issue, did you then apply when you did a new project? Did you then take care to do a more thorough needs assessment, talk to your beneficiaries or your project partner early? Did you get feedback from other stakeholders like your Enactus program manager or business advisors? And then even beyond that, did you share that with other people in your team so they could apply that in their projects and learn from that experience? So I think that's kind of the direction I'd take here in terms of, okay, if you know why, how do you avoid that in future? Question here, Sophie, for you. Where can we prepare for the interview from? So, i.e., where can we find example questions?
Oh yeah, for sure. So shall we cover off the ones that I mean, you can find them online, but I would probably go from the sources that we've mentioned today. So let me just go back here we go. Here are some interview example questions. So I just take a snapshot of that slide. I know this will be recorded as well, so you might even be able to listen to the recording and cover off the questions that Abs also gave in addition to this, which were questions like, give me an example of a time where you had to turn around a project in a tight deadline. How did you do it and what actions did you take, that kind of thing. So yeah, these are the types of questions that you might be asked. We won't be giving you all of the questions because that would just be giving the game away. But yeah, I would focus on the leadership principles and then you'll be totally fine.
And so can you drop your LinkedIn in the chat as well so these guys can?
Yeah, I can actually stop sharing my screen and then I can access the chat. So I'll do that now.
Awesome. I've got a question here. What would you say is the most beneficial thing you gained from Enactus in the real world of work at Amazon specifically? Alternatively, what would you recommend we make the most of as students doing Enactus? Ooh, okay. I'll start with the second part. What to make the most of? Really make use of the opportunity you have to make a difference. Especially while you're still in education. I think you've got the opportunity there with Enactus, whether it's to the fundraising side, to directly on projects, to leadership positions, to actually think about how can you make a difference in local communities and further abroad. And in that process, develop a lot of skills on leadership and project management. Those are skills I use to this point, and I've kept building on them with everything I've done. But I learned so much there in terms of, I think it's very different when I wasn't the best at my uni assignments. I hated doing assignments, so I'd always do them last minute. But when you're working on an Enactus project, it's not just you, right? What you do impacts your team members who are also volunteering their time. It impacts your beneficiaries, your project partners. They're, looking to you to take that ownership and responsibility. So I think it forces you to think much more responsibly, to take ownership and really be on top of your game and be organized in how you manage your work and things you have to do. So I think that's what I found useful to carry forward in my career. In terms of things to make the most of, really make the use of your network. I have so many friends that I made through Enactus and from different universities that maybe I wouldn't have met if I didn't get involved with Enactus or other societies. So, make the most of that, build friendships, connect with advisors, people from different companies, your university staff, because those are people you can, learn from, stay in touch with for the future. I thought that was really valuable because whether it's on a social level, whether it's for career advice, whether for something else, I've always found there's someone in the Enactus network I could connect with for support, but equally I can offer support, right, and share examples, experiences I have to help them too, right? A network's a two-way thing. So hopefully that answers that one. Sophie, does Amazon accept speculative applications?
Speculative as in not sure of your grades yet? Is that what you mean?
Possibly. I don't know who asked that question, if they're still here to clarify.
Sorry. Hi, I did. In the sense that if there are only certain roles for, say, graduate positions, can there be applications for roles that might not be on your like advertised graduate list? For maybe
I see.
That are kind of niche.
Yeah, so do you know what? If I would actually just wait until the first week of August and then find the roles that you're most interested in applying for. I wouldn't just apply to any graduate role that you see on the site at the moment, because you won't be then considered for other applications. But what you can do is you can make multiple applications for different roles at the same time. So when you see a couple that you're interested in, you can then apply for all of them at the same time. It won't, if you get rejected from one, it won't mean that you're, not accepted for another. So I would make the most out of all of the applications when they do become available.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
I think so. If we aim to cut off by 15:15.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. Right, we've got one here. I think this is probably better for you. Can you expand more tips for Amazon higher view interviews?
On Amazon, what was that, higher view?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what that's referring to.
We still have that person on the call.
Do we still have the person on the call?
Yeah, I was the one that had the question. Hello?
Hello, yeah, so we can hear you. What do you mean by higher view?
Yeah, so earlier in May, I applied for a position at Amazon for a project manager apprentice.
Mhm.
So I was told to like do a pre-recorded interview, but which was done. It was done through IRView, and when I did it, I didn't get a response. So since then, I've been quite baffled if I didn't know what went wrong.
Oh, I see. Okay. So was it a first interview? Or was it?
Yeah.
It was a first
Yeah, it
interview.
was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the
So if
first
you
stage
haven't
of the
heard
interview.
back, I do know that it's kind of like an Amazon-wide policy that we don't have the option. Actually, this is useful for everyone on the call. We don't have an option to go back to every single application that's made, but just because your application wasn't taken any further on that particular occasion, it doesn't mean that you won't be considered for other roles. So we do also have other positions that are very, similar to each other. So like I said, go to the link, and I will get that link and post it in this chat, for the student programs website, and also the actual industry hire website, and apply for roles that you think you might be suitable for. Because it sounds like if you haven't got a response, then it might be that your application won't be taken any further on this occasion.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
No problem. Let me pop the links in here in the chat.
While you do that, I've got a specific question here. Since you don't have big teams at Enactus Surrey, how do you delegate the society task with other committee members? For example, when you organise an event and you still have to make sure extra tickets are sold. I honestly don't know how big the Enactus Surrey team is these days. My main involvement with Enactus is managing the partnership between Enactus UK and Amazon, so I do a lot of work there. I think when I was there, it was a long time ago, so I feel really old, but we had 80 members at one point, and a committee of about 10. Appreciate things change over time. So I think regardless of size of team, it's, it is difficult to delegate tasks. It's a really good skill to learn early on through Enactus. I think, when you're delegating tasks to other committee members, it's really important to be clear with people what exactly it is you want, and when you need it by, because that helps them, understand the level of work, and actually ask them, okay, so-and-so, can you prepare the agenda for the next meeting and type up the notes? Can you send this to everyone by the end of Friday next week? But do ask them if they can do it, because then it gives people an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. But also it means, it kind of prompts them to make a commitment. Are they going to do it or not? Because I have seen examples before where you delegate something to someone, they stay really quiet because they don't want to kind of say no in front of everyone, and then later on they haven't done it, and then you miss out, right? And it impacts the team. So I think, don't be afraid to delegate. Just be super clear in how you do it. Ask people if they have time, and if they can do it by the deadline you want. If you're in a situation where there's just too much to do, and that happens often as well, then prioritization is really key. So what things do you have on your list right now which are urgent and important? Get those out of the way, and make sure, whether it's you or someone else, those are being prioritized. After that, you've kind of got this bucket of, okay, well, this isn't urgent, but it is important. So you need to find the time to do those kind of things, because it will add a lot of value to the project or the activity that you're doing. Anything that's not urgent and not important, bottom of your list. You might even want to question whether you need to do those at all. And then sometimes you get stuff which is urgent but not that important. And it's kind of like, well, what's the value of that activity? Why is it urgent? So is it because it's not important to you, but that other person really needs it and it will help them to deliver something that will benefit the team? So I think if you look online, you can find like the urgent important prioritization matrix. I think that can help you as a student, as a leader, as an employee, prioritize your task, but also to help other people prioritize what they need to do. Right, I think that was a lot. I don't know if I've missed anything. Is there any other questions? There's a lot in the chat, so hopefully we've covered them all.
I think that looks like it might be it. So thank you so much, obviously, Charlie, for putting the event on, and Abs for hosting this session with me, and for everyone joining. Super appreciate you listening to us for a whole hour and a bit. And see you next time, and wishing you all the luck with future CV creations and interview processes and job applications as well. So unless there's anything else you wanted to say, Charlie, I think we'll just head out. Was there anything else?
Just want to say massive thank you to Abs and Sophie for delivering that session. You obviously dealt with an absolute avalanche of questions, so many good questions about CVs and Enactus. Love to see it, really, really great. If you enjoyed this session, please do go ahead and register for the rest every Wednesday throughout August and September. There'll be more to come to help you with your employability in all sorts of different areas, lots of exciting stuff. Check out the Hey Summit site via the links that have been sent on your emails, on our social media. It's plastered all over everything. So everybody take care, have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you, bye.
Thanks everyone, see ya.